Ready? Are we on? No. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for coming on so much short notice. Just so that you're aware, we're streaming this. This will be posted on our YouTube webpage, youtube.com, and then do the search Redeemer Tucson in our Bible classes services, and this will also be on there. So if you want to go back and review, that's fine, or if somebody else wasn't able to make it tonight, since we did it on short notice, you can go back and review as well. We have a slideshow presentation. We have a handout that probably you got on the way in. We'll be referring to both throughout. This is my sidekick here, Wayne Baxmann. I'm Adam Miller, the pastor of Redeemer. And Wayne, why don't you kick us off by explaining how we even got to this spot?
Right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's a joy to be able to share the excitement and the enthusiasm that has built up over the last months about this possible project. Back last year at the Redeemer golf outing, after people sat around, had something to eat and a beer or two, there was some discussion about what it would take to get a Lutheran High School here in Tucson. And so a group came together. They called themselves the feasibility study team. And after meeting a couple of times, the word got out that I had started a Lutheran high school back in 1978 up in Tacoma, Washington. And they said, we got to get Wayne involved. And so here I am. And this group has been meeting about typically once every couple of weeks. And we have done a lot of homework. As if you've gone through the handout sheets that you have before you, this is kind of evidence of the things that we have done over the past year. I want to emphasize to you that this is a feasibility study. Is it possible that we could establish a Lutheran high school here in Tucson? And if we did, why would we want to do that? And so we put together a number of documents, things that you have in front of you, things that will be flashing up here on the screen. And hopefully by the end of the evening, we'll give you opportunities for input, for ask questions, make suggestions, and that sort of thing. But ultimately, the pastors in the area I think, have the responsibility for determining whether we go ahead with this or not. We presented, or Pastor Mueller presented the concept, the idea, at a pastor's meeting back in, I think, January. And they said, yeah, go ahead and pursue this. And so that's when this whole thing started to grow legs. So here we are now, 13, 14 months later. We presented all of this to all of the area pastors at a meeting about a month ago. And they said, this sounds good, we like it. We ought to think about establishing what we are calling an implementation team. There are, the 5 of us have done pretty much all the legwork, but now if we're going to proceed with this, we need some authorization. We need to share all the information that we have put together with the members of our congregations. And I can tell you, we have done these presentations at Holy Cross, at Grace downtown for all of their satellite congregations. We did a presentation up at Shepherd of the Hills, and now tonight we're doing this one here at Redeemer. So before we go too far, I think it's important for you to recognize that this is a feasibility study. It's not going to happen unless we decide to make it happen, okay? So we want to share this information with you tonight, and as I have said many times, if it's God's will that this happens here in Tucson, it will happen. And I'm delighted to have been part of the feasibility study. You want to flash up what our agenda is?
All right, tonight here's our meeting agenda. We want to walk you through these different 8 categories. First of all, it's going to be a Lutheran High School. We're going to talk about faculty, namely where the teacher's going to come from. We'll talk about the students, where the kid's going to come from. The property, where you're going to put it. We'll look at financials. In other words, is it or is it not financially feasible for this to get off the ground? We'll talk about possible organization. We'll talk about sustainability, which means you don't want to start it and then have to close it in 3 years. And then also some takeaways at the end.
All right. The first sheet that you have in the packet. But I want to point out a couple of things. Many parents consider local public options undesirable for a number of reasons, and I think you all know what those might be, right? The alternatives to attending local public schools in the Tucson area are Push Ridge Academy, Sal Point Catholic High School, or Desert Christian High School. All of these are over on the east side of town, or at least Sal Point is more centrally located, but all of these are fully, they're maxed out. Some of these schools have long waiting lists. You can't even think about getting in because they don't have any room for more students. And besides what, these are all heterodox Christian organizations. That we find to be a little bit difficult at times. So, in any case, transportation from the west side of town is at least 25 minutes away from any of these schools. And so when we look at options for our kids from Redeemer or this side of town, we recognize that there are just a few. One, of course, is Arizona Lutheran Academy. We've had kids going up to ALA for years. ALA started the same year that I started Evergreen Lutheran High School up in Tacoma, Washington in 1978. I worked very closely with Bob Adix as he opened ALA and I opened Evergreen. So I'm very familiar with ALA, and I know that we have had numbers of students go up to ALA. In fact, we have 20 students right now from the Tucson area who go to ALA. They, in fact, run a bus down here on Monday morning at 6:30, transport these kids up to ALA, keep them up there for the week, and then bring them back down here on Friday afternoon. But again, ALA is about 100 miles from here, 2 hours, and parents have told us they're increasingly dissatisfied with having their kids living with other families 100 miles away. All week long, they don't have the opportunity to function as moms and dads for their own kids. Another option is California Lutheran High School, which is about 500 miles from here, over in Willamar. And then, of course, our synod operates 2 prep schools. One, Luther Prep, up in Watertown, Wisconsin, and another one, Michigan Lutheran Seminary in Saginaw, Michigan. And of course, you can imagine the distance factor there. These are dormitory schools. These are places where kids go. The synod schools are designed specifically for teenagers who are interested in pursuing ministry, either teaching or preaching ministry, ultimately to go on to Martin Luther College or the seminary. So again, all of those schools have dorm facilities to accommodate students from distant areas. Our research has shown, however, that more and more, and I think this is commendable, really, more and more parents are reluctant or hesitant to send their children away from home for their high school education. Even as we talk to parents of our 7th and 8th graders now, we're hearing more and more, I don't want to send my kid up to ALA because I want my kid here at home. And so that's one of the primary reasons why we're looking at this opportunity. A Lutheran high school in our area would strengthen local youth programs. This is kind of interesting. It's been my experience over the years that congregations, pastors have criticized us as Lutheran high school administrators for the kids from our congregation are so involved in the high school that they don't participate in the local congregational youth group activities. And that's a valid concern. But on the other hand, I think because the kids are involved more, they are brought there's a certain affinity, there's an attraction. We're bringing these kids together and strengthening their faith as they learn more and more every day from the Word of God. A school would help local congregations retain members who are currently moving to Phoenix. We know here at Redeemer there are a couple of families who, because of COVID, people are able to work remotely. They don't have to go to work. They can work from their homes. And we know of 2 or 3 families here at Redeemer who have simply said, well, I don't have to live in Tucson anymore. We can move up to Phoenix to enable our son or daughter to go to ALA. And Redeemer is losing some good families because of that. A very important point is the next one. A Lutheran high school here in Tucson will strengthen the family units in our congregations because teenagers will continue to grow in their faith as they attend our school and not be influenced by worldly philosophy. And then on the bottom of that page, kids who attend a Lutheran high, and this has been statistically proven, that kids who attend a Lutheran high school tend to remain faithful and loyal to their local congregations long after they are out of high school, whereas it's been shown, again, statistically, that many cases where kids attend a public high school tend to drift away from their church as they grow into their early adult years. And then one more point, it would be in a Lutheran high school in our area would be attractive to unchurched families or families from other church bodies who would be interested in receiving a Lutheran Christian education. Again, the options that are available in town are full. They're full because people want Christian education. And if we provided this up, this would be one more place where kids from other church groups, other church denominations, or unchurched families looking for value-based Christian education, they would have an opportunity to find it at our Lutheran High School. There are a couple of other points there, but I think it pretty well explains the rationale for why we would want a Lutheran high school here in Tucson. Any questions about any of these? All right.
On the second page, walk through me just briefly with the survey results. To my left and your right, this is Nicole Glenn at the corner. She's been sending out surveys to a variety of people, so she's the lady behind the, I don't know, mask, behind the email. And so she sent out a number of survey results. This is just a small sample or portion of what was done. We had 116 responses to the emails that we sent out. If there's a Lutheran High School in Tucson beginning in fall of 2024, would you consider sending your kid? You can see the breakdown is about 50-50. 50 would say absolutely for sure, and 50 would say depends. The depends is largely, is there going to be a high school experience? What are the amenities, facilities, sports programs, music programs? And I need to see what that looks like before I for sure sign on the dotted line. Nevertheless, there's quite a bit of enthusiasm there. If Redeemer were to add grades 9 to 12, would you keep your kids in the school? Now, this concept is basically, you know, do you extend Redeemer, go K-12? That's what the question is, and we have lots and lots of enthusiasm there as well. 60% and 25% of the people didn't even go to Redeemer. What are some of the things that are important to you in high school? Christ-centered tops the list, but then you see close behind location. Can I get there conveniently? That bears out what Wayne said on the cover page, which is distance to ALA is kind of a deal breaker for a lot of families. Extracurriculars, that's not just athletics, but it's all kinds of other sorts of things, is all part of that value add. In terms of location, what's the maximum way that you're going to feel comfortable with? And you see that there's a lot of people who want to kind of keep it somewhat local. And more on that in a minute when we talk about the location. Almost all the responses had overwhelmingly positive feedback. All right, let's get into our slides here. The first thing that we want to talk about is that what we're planning, the feasibility team said we want this to be a Lutheran high school, which means it's going to be our own theology. Same stuff that you get at Redeemer, same stuff that you get at our own local Tucson Lutheran congregations is going to be the basis and the foundation that we're going to teach also in the high school. There's a handout here. Wayne, usually you walk through this. You're going to do that tonight too?
Sure. Take a look at page 4 on the 4 and 5 on the handout. This is what we have. We perceive this as our mission statement and then our vision if we were in fact going to have a Lutheran high school here in Tucson. This blank, we don't have a name for it yet, but let's just say the Tucson Lutheran High School exists or will exist to prepare adolescents in the Tucson area for lives of committed faith in Jesus as their Savior and to prepare them for adult lives of service to that Savior. And our vision We will be a part of an independent, nonprofit organization dedicated to providing the highest quality Lutheran Christian education to children and adolescents in the Tucson area. The school will be operated by a board of directors chosen from among members of WELS congregations in the Tucson area. We would provide quality Lutheran Christian education to prepare WELS students to become servant leaders in their homes, their churches, and their communities. We would offer quality Lutheran Christian education to students from unchurched backgrounds, first and foremost to learn of Jesus as their Savior, and eventually to become members of the kingdom of God through faith in Jesus Christ. Secondarily, the school will prepare them for lives of service. It would prepare students for all forms of post-secondary education or military or vocational opportunities. This would not be a Synod prep school. This would not be a prep school just for kids who want to become pastors or teachers. This would provide students the opportunity to go to community colleges, universities throughout the United States, or vocational opportunities, apprenticeship programs, and that sort of thing, or the military. It would offer opportunities for families to grow in their faith and to become role models for young families who will be the future of our churches and communities. It will offer WELS congregations in the Tucson area opportunities to reach out to non-member students and families by offering Bible information classes as an entry point for membership in our WELS congregations. It would offer congregations in the Tucson area opportunities to gather for worship and fellowship in an effort to strengthen the bond of unity among our WELS congregations. It would provide incentives for WELS congregations in the Tucson area to expand their scope of ministry to include more extensive ministry to youth and families, as well as to grow the network of WELS congregations in the area, thus expanding the family of believers in Tucson. And finally, it would provide a conduit for students and families from unchurched backgrounds to receive a quality, distinctively Orthodox Lutheran high school education, and thereby becoming part of God's family of believers. That is what we perceive to be the mission and the vision for this Lutheran high school. Comments or questions about that? Again, reflects back to the statement that Pastor Miller made at the very beginning. This would be a distinctively Lutheran, not a generic Christian high school, a distinctively Lutheran high school.
A couple of things on the slides. This is mostly what's offered at ALA. 4-year Lutheran religious curriculum, daily chapel services. You're teaching all of your other classes from the Christ-centered curriculum. The federated feeder system, we'll talk about a little bit later under organization. Just because one Lutheran school we have in Tucson, it's Redeemer, it's going to be tough for the continuation of a Lutheran high school with just one school. If ESAs hang in there, hopefully we can plant other schools because we're going to need that in order for the high school to be sustainable. By the way, if we didn't say so, the only rules are that there's no rules. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and just say so.
Yes.
With Push Ridge, they have part of their enrollment process is having a recommendation from your church, your pastor, and I know
parents are expected to sign a covenant.
Yeah, but there's an expectation that you do have a faith life. I don't know if ALA or any of our other Lutheran schools have any type of requirement on that. And I know this is just feasibility, but is the plan to have any, if somebody didn't have a church that they belong to, is there going to be any type of requirement for those that don't have a home church?
Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. She said, Push Ridge asks area pastors to sign an agreement that they're Christian and participate with the program. Push Ridge is what they call a covenant school, which means we take anybody and dump them kind of in the mix and homogenize. When we say decidedly Lutheran school, that's not what we're going to do. And so if you don't have the parents, you don't have the kids. We would like to work with mom and dad and lay the Lutheran foundation underneath them. If they're not our Lutheran family already, we don't owe them ministry because they belong to some other congregation. We do owe them transparency. Here's what your kids are going to be learning. Now, we're just beginning to roll this out at Redeemer because our church has been so short-staffed in our time. So we're just on the front side of beginning that whole process. But we would envision something comparable, and it's going to show up on a later slide.
We're going to speak to that point specifically when we talk about students. Okay.
And can I ask one more
Yeah,
question
go
that
ahead.
hopefully doesn't derail, but as far as like volunteer hours, you know, parents staying involved at school, whether it be in a K to 8 or whether it be in high school, are there, you know, plans to kind of have parents, I guess, you know, team more with the teachers and not just send them, but actually be a part? I think that makes a big difference. I don't know if that's in the mindset, but I hope it is, because I think that would be a wonderful thing to see. Like I said, that may not be on the same topic, but
When we get to the spot of hiring a director, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
The thoughts are wonderful. That's just beyond the scope of the feasibility is all. So we're just kind of at the can we go farther spot. And
Yeah. I've referred to that in my experience as a high school administrator as mandatory volunteerism. That's kind of an oxymoron, but and we had talked about doing this even among students, that would be part of their religion curriculum, so especially during their senior year, that they would have to participate in a program of volunteerism at their local congregation.
I think it leads to the success of the
Yeah.
school.
But that's
But yeah, but in the future, down the road.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
anybody else?
I think Tom had his hand up.
If you could repeat some of the questions from up in front, us senior citizens back here don't have.
Hey
our-
Tom, there's a lot of open seats in front.
And Wayne, I'm not sure your mic is on.
He'll continue to talk louder. Lee in the room over here said it's going into the microphone, so we know it's on the stream. But we'll work on kicking it up a notch, just like Emerald. Or is that guy's name? Who's the cook? Emerald? She was asking largely about parents participating in the high school because that helps make the culture. And we said that's beyond the scope of the feasibility study, but we would certainly envision that would get some legs down the road, whoever takes the baton when we get to that spot. All right, let's talk about Let's talk about faculty. Where are we going to get the teachers from? As we kind of kick the tires in, I don't know. I don't know that anybody's too surprised that we're in here tonight because kind of it's been in the wind. But we've had a lot of local interest from qualified educators. They may be public school, high school teachers, they may be in other vocations, but they said, listen, I don't know if this is going to get off the ground or not, but if the high school materializes, please come talk to me because I would be really, really interested in being a part of that. And I'm talking about in terms of the faculty. Now, that's not a guarantee of anything. We would work, of course, to get them Synod certified. But we would start there. We would start with local WELS educators. Wayne, do we have a list of 7 or 8 people who've expressed very, very strong interest? Is it something like that?
Well, first of all, let me say that we are aware, fully aware, that at the beginning of this current school year, the 22-23 school year, back in last August or September, among our WELS Lutheran elementary schools and high schools, there were about 130 teacher vacancies. And there were congregations and Lutheran high schools that are scurrying around trying to find teachers to fill these positions. Well, there is a concern and has been expressed to us that if we open a Lutheran high school here and we need 5, 6, 7, however many teachers, you're going to be adding to the problem. Well, the fact is that we have had a number of 6 or 7 experienced teachers at the high school level or the college level who have come and said to us, I would love to be part of this if it comes to be. Okay? People who are members of our WELS congregations, who are in public education right now, and who have said, I would love to get involved in our Lutheran High School. There are WELS teachers who have taught in our schools in the past, who, for various reasons, family and other reasons, have decided to step out of the teaching ministry for a while and now would be interested in getting back in, right? Some of those folks have stepped up and said, I would be interested. And again, I said, there are a couple of people who are involved in colleges and universities who have expressed a strong desire to become part of of our faculty. We know of at least one PhD who said, I would love to teach all the sciences, and he's teaching at a college level right now in a school of nursing. I don't think we would have to, at least initially, that we would have to go to the to call what's called call from the field, call teachers out of other schools to come and teach at our Lutheran High School. This would be a huge blessing, okay? And if anybody is sitting here tonight that would be interested, come and talk to us.
You got a lot of gas in the tank, haven't you, Wayne?
Yeah, right.
Well, let's just say for the sake of argument that we're not able to find 5 from Tucson, or we need somebody specialized like a director to oversee the whole, see the whole operation. We would need to call from the field as necessary. We would envision starting with 5 faculty, more on that a little bit later because we're going to talk about sizing and structure and we'll help you with some of the numbers. We would add from there. The model is about 25 kids per grade to begin with bootstrapping. So 5 faculty, 50 kids is about 1 teacher per 10. So the student to teacher ratio is not too bad. We may have to do some bootstrapping, which means maybe we can tap the area pastors to teach religion. Again, this is a concept. These are not decisions that have been made. We're just presenting a possibility for a way forward, like how can we work together to get it off the ground. Megan?
Is your biggest concern getting the faculty opposed to being able to pay the faculty? Like,
No. No, I think we'd be able to do both.
Repeat that question.
The question was, is your biggest concern getting the faculty or being able to pay the faculty? When we go to the financial tab, we'll talk more about how all of that stuff fits together.
Are you planning to start with all 4 high school grades, or are you going to start with 9th grade and move each year and add a grade?
My experience when I started the high school in Tacoma, we started with grades 9 and 10, and then the second year we added the third, the junior year, and then the fourth, the senior year. So that's the way, I mean, it's a little easier to start small and work into it than to jump into into the pool, the deep end of the pool right off the bat. So very likely, at least the way I'm thinking about it right now, that we would start with grades 9 and 10. And the earliest would be in the fall of 2024. I think we mentioned that earlier. There's a possibility that Pastor Mueller has talked about make it alive in 25. It depends how things fall into place here in the next year or so. Yeah. Other questions? Anybody? Yeah.
Is there, I'm assuming that Redeemer, as it is now, that the high school would be connected, they'd be part of the same umbrella, is that right?
We'll talk more about that in our organization. I mean, there's concepts that are floating around that's beyond. We'll float something and people down the road are going to have to determine that.
I guess what my thought was is just being at Redeemer and seeing how our class sizes grow. I guess my thought is down the road, would there be any thought to house some of our upper grades that attend here on that campus to help ease up space here?
The question is, you talked about that campus. We haven't talked about that campus yet. So can we introduce that campus so that we can frame the conversation?
Yes.
But you're talking about moving middle school to the high school so that we can have more space here?
That, we have talked about that. It's part of the feasibility. It's an option. Okay. Anybody else? Right.
Where are the kids going to come from? All right, let's talk about students. The top one is a Wells base. Now, we have, it depends how you count Grace, if they're 4 campuses or one church or 4, but let's just count them as 4. We got 8 churches who might reasonably be part of a federation. We polled all of those churches and said, send us your list of kids from 0 through 18. And we plotted them all on a chart with graduation year, 2025, 2026, 2027, so forth and so on. And pretty much every year for the next 12 years, all of our churches combined have about, plus or minus, 20 kids per year, starting 2025, 2026, all the way through almost 2040. So, 20 kids per year times 4 grades in high school is 80. So in today's numbers, we have about 80 eligible kids from all of our Lutheran congregations who might possibly be part of the school. Now, we're not going to get 100% participation, I'm sure, from all of our Wells congregations. However, that's why we say a Wells base. I'm certain that we would get half, perhaps even, that would be 40, perhaps even 50 of them. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Wayne did on the Decidedly Lutheran slide. If we're going to operate the school as a ministry, which is why we do everything, we would certainly want to reach out to those people who do not know Jesus whatsoever. And that's the next line. If you have no church home, take them through an information class. Partner with the parents. Here's what we're teaching your kids. We want you to have this foundation so that it lives inside the home too. Because when mom and dad and the kids are on the same page, that makes everybody healthier. Similarly with the other Christians, we at least want to be transparent with these people to say, if you're coming from a different background, we're going to be teaching you things that you may not hold dear. So we should at least let you know what it is that we're teaching them. The International with a question mark is something that a lot of schools are doing now, largely because it pays the bills. But they get kids in from all over the world and put them up in some sort of housing dormitory, some such a thing, and then they bring them into the school, and the tuition that's paid is something that's very favorable to the operation of a school. We've had only, this is a feasibility, right? We haven't gone down the road. We just put it up there for where are the kids going to come from. So we would envision 25 kids per grade times 4 grades, about 100 in time. Perhaps it would swell to 150, but we don't know that this is going to be super huge, at least not as we're modeling now. Wayne, anything on this slide?
Yeah, first of all, let me address the matter of the international students. Just about all of our Lutheran high, there are now 27 Wells Lutheran high schools around the country. When I retired in 2000, there were 22. And so in the last 20 years, we've added 6 or 7 schools, and another one opening this coming fall up in northern Wisconsin. Nearly all of them try to attract international students because people from Korea, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, and other Asian countries, some European countries, want to send their kids to high school in the United States so that they would be better prepared to enter an American college somewhere down the road. And so these families are literally paying $30,000 to $40,000 a year to send their kids to a Lutheran High School here in the United States. Wisconsin Lutheran High School up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, has students right now from 17 different countries. 17 different countries. So this is a big cash cow, to put it quite bluntly. But more than that, they are almost all of these kids are coming from non-Christian backgrounds. And last year, if I remember correctly, don't hold me to this, I think Wisconsin Lutheran High School baptized 25 kids. Yeah. So it's a tremendous mission outreach opportunity, and it also obviously has financial implications. Yes?
Yeah, question regarding the number of students. By comparison, how many students are currently at Redeemer School?
Mr. Rich, where are you? I know he's here.
Back here, Mr. Baxmann.
Yeah. How many students are currently at Redeemer?
In preschool through 8th grade, we have 181. 120 are in the elementary school, but our bottom grades are pretty heavy. We have 20 or 19 in kindergarten. We have 23 in first grade. We have 16 in second grade. We have 30 applications for kindergarten next year. So we have very strong numbers, especially in the bottom grade.
Okay, that's it. Right. Anybody else? Question? So that there are people who say, yeah, 100 to 150 is probably realistic, but there are others who are saying to us, that's low. You need to think bigger. And we have some folks who have said, we could envision this school to be a student body of 500 kids. That would be pretty aggressive, I think. But yeah, that school that I started 45 years ago is now 105 or so, and they're in a somewhat similar situation. We drew kids from the other side of the mountain, Cascade Mountains. We had kids from Alaska. We had kids from California. So I don't envision that so much, although there could very well be kids coming over from Albuquerque. We have a Lutheran elementary school in Albuquerque. We have a Lutheran elementary school in El Paso. Conceivably, we could attract a couple of kids from distant areas if we were able to provide some kind of housing arrangement. Okay. All right, the property. You want to take off on this? Or?
Yeah. We've identified a property that would be suitable for us to start a high school. That should say 21 acres, not 24. It's named Accelerated Learning Lab. I'll show you where that is on a map just momentarily. The current it's for sale. The current cost is $3.5 million. The next one is just a guess. The first one should be 21 acres. That's accurate. 3.5 million is accurate. We don't yet know how much it's going to cost to renovate. It may be more than that. And then we would need to develop site plans for future improvements, athletic fields, gymnasiums. More on that in just a minute. Remember the slide, the survey that Nicole did, and there was a strong desire. Location to our home is a real big important factor. I think it was like the third one or something like that. Here's where our churches are in town. You see Redeemer and Shepherd of the Hills. You see Grace, Tucson, Holy Cross, Vale, and Sarita. And the proposed site is in blue. That proposed site is about 5 minutes off I-10. If you get off on Sunset, if you exit on Sunset, you can be to the property in plus or minus 5 minutes. If you got out on Silver Bell and went straight south, it's about 12 minutes, maybe longer, if you don't hit the lights quite right. The reason why this site seems to be pretty favorable is it looks like it's pretty conveniently located to the majority of the congregations that we have. Even Grace Sarita, they take a minivan and they bring kids up to us already today. And they could probably be to the proposed site maybe in 30, 35 minutes, something like that. So more on, here's a couple of pictures. I don't know if these are going to be translated super well. Incidentally, the site today is not used. The site had been used for a K-12. It had previously been used for K-12. There are 7 buildings on the campus, all right? They used one for preschool, they used one for elementary school, and then there's buildings in the back for high school. It has not been used for several years. The owner of the property also operates Greenfields. And when COVID came, they merged their operations and moved everybody over to Greenfields, leaving this one vacant. Now, there's a fellow on the campus who works in the afternoon to kind of keep most of the stuff going, but were we to do something like this, we would need to update the facilities in the interests of making them high school worthy or education worthy. That building in the lower left, that's an example of what's the high school building. The building in the upper right is right after you drive into the campus with the tile roof. That one would be where the elementary or maybe the middle school would be. That was your question. These conversations have been had a little bit, not a lot of it. That depends on a lot of other dominoes to fall.
But I think it could be said that the building that he just referred to would be suitable for elementary or middle school. That could very easily serve as the classrooms for the
high school.
The startup of the high school. And those classrooms are in reasonably decent shape. It's kind of in a horseshoe shape with a courtyard in the middle. Enough classrooms that we could accommodate the high school right from the get-go in that area. As I said, there are no athletic facilities, there's no gymnasium.
There's no main gathering space?
Right, no big gathering space.
No cafeteria?
No, yeah. So, yeah, there would have to be some upgrades, and that's why when we said the cost would be $3.5 million, that's, we know. Okay, that's what it will cost to buy the place. And we're projecting perhaps $750,000 to upgrade. We have
That's just to get started,
right,
to make the buildings up to code so that we could teach. But we would envision athletic fields and other things in time as well, right?
There is a company called Catalyst Construction. They're a Wells group. They are located up in Wisconsin, but they're opening an office here in Arizona starting this summer in Phoenix. And they have offered to come and do what's called a
Property assessment?
property assessment survey. That's what it is. Property assessment survey. They have about 12 pages of checklists, and they will come in and evaluate this site based upon all of those checklist points, and then tell us what would be necessary to bring it up to code or whatever. And so that within a couple of weeks we should have a more firm number about what it will cost in addition to the $3.5 million to make the site suitable.
You can see here, there's an Olympic-sized pool. Maynard, you were at MLPS once or twice, huh? Let's talk about the terms. What we've had members at on our team secure the property this way. All right, we know it's a $3.5 million sale. We've had people who've put up $50,000 in earnest money. That, I think the clock was, do you remember? February 10th, I believe it is. On February 10th, we have 6 months free ride, a free option, which means we have 6 months to kick the tire, do all your research, find out if it's suitable for you, find out what you're going to need to do, get all your plans together. If for any reason at all you say, you know what, I don't think this is the property for us, we'll get the $50,000 back and we can walk away. Okay? However, if the reverse happens, at the end of 6 months we say we want to go forward, it would kick into a 3-month to close. Well, 6 months from February is September, is that right?
The closing date is October 23rd, I believe.
So sometime later this year, if all of this materializes down the road, and there's more stuff that we need to present, we would be in ownership of the property sometime later this year, and then we'd have 6 months to get our ship shape, if it's even remotely reasonable to get open in 24, but a lot of things would need to happen advantageously that way. The other thing, the bottom line should not say 3 years, but 1 year. We've negotiated the contract that says if we purchase the property for $3.5 million, the owner will carry the property himself and only charges interest. Because obviously we're going to need to do a fundraise in order to purchase the property. More on that in a moment.
Just let me point out, it was during our investigation research, there are 2 men on this feasibility team that are real estate gurus, okay? They determined that properties along the I-10 corridor, now I don't know how far back this would go, but along the I-10 corridor, property values for raw land is $710,000 an acre. We're getting 21 acres with 7 buildings for $3.5 million. You do the math.
I just want to make you aware too that ADOT is currently doing a project right now where they're going to make Sunset go over and access River Road.
Yep.
So folks will now have access to over the freeway to have access to Sawmill, River Road. They're on the way with that now.
Right from Guitar Center to high school.
With a big sign on the freeway that says.
Alan?
Yeah.
Is this an effort amongst the Tucson Lutherans, or does the Synod play any role in this? Do they finance any of this? Are there loans through the Synod?
We're going to come to the financing in a moment. Your question is, does the Synod help with loans and financing and that sort of stuff? Let's put that into a package in a moment. All right. I want to. We'll answer the question. Is there anybody else on the property itself? Okay. Let's get to the next one, which is financials. This is actually in your packet. It looks like, what does this look like? Page 6. Okay, page 6. We had a member of a sister congregation do all kinds of templates. And the only template that worked, in other words, the only template that didn't make us go bankrupt is this one. All right? The only way this is feasible is if we own the property outright. If we had, she ran 100% mortgage, 75, 50, 25, 10. If we have any mortgage or lease payments at all, we'll never be able to afford teachers. Okay? So the only way this is feasible is if we own the property outright. Well, we talked up here just a second ago, and we made mention that it's $3.5 million. It's going to cost a lot to upgrade just to get in the door. If we want athletic fields, that's an extra ticket. So we're going to have to do a substantial fundraise. More on that in just a moment. If you look down the left-hand side, there's a lot of assumptions that are in here. All right. The lady who put together this budget basically explains that this is pegged, or the assumptions are that we raise $6 million. The assumptions are 25 kids per grade. You start out year one with 50 kids, then 75, then 100. I mean, so this is the way that this has been pegged. All right? So all of the numbers on here make sense and work, and we don't go bankrupt in a few years if we own the property outright. And that's when we got back to 5 teachers and 3 staff. we can afford those sort of things. We're pegging, by the way, we're assuming also, let me come back to that one. We're assuming $14,000 tuition per year, and the way in which that would be paid, at least as far as a feasibility goes, is it feasible? We would tap $7,000 from the ESA, that's government money, that's been passed here recently. If you belong to one of our Lutheran congregations in town, the congregations would subsidize students from their own church who go to the high school in lieu of a federation payment. All right, I'll explain that in a second. And then possibly $2,000 can come out of pocket. This is a good time for me to reiterate that this is a feasibility. The tuition may be that, it may not be that, it may look like that, it may not look like that. All we're trying to do is provide a way forward. How could this possibly work? All right? So nothing on here is decided or etched in stone. It's probably good to say that out loud. I'm just explaining right now how in the world would we be able to get kids into the school at an accessible price. And this looks workable. If I can go backwards, how in the world are we going to pay for a campus that costs $3.5 million and needs a lot of duct tape and baling twine to get going, and then also athletic fields and any number of other things? We'd have to raise a lot of money. There is a packet here called, it's page 7, and the fellow's name, the outfit is called James D. Clote and Associates. He has a book of business. This is really this fundraising stuff is really a niche market. There's a number of companies who do it, but this fella had as many references as maybe the next 10 or 15 combined. So we contacted him. He's an extraordinarily impressive man. You can read their pledge of service. I'm not going to walk through that. If you want to flip to page 8, this is just an example of some of the congregations that he's worked with, particularly the Lutheran ones, and the amount of money that they've raised. We've contacted this man, and what he suggests that we aim to do is raise $10 million. And he believes that we can raise $10 million because we would begin by soliciting gifts from our own Lutheran congregations. We would also partner with and solicit from the community, only because we're going to be serving the community in a number of different ways. Also, if you're not doing a church per se, but a high school per se, there's grants and money available for robotics and math and science and all of these other kinds of things. And because he's done schools before and school fundraising, he's already talking about partnering with chambers of commerce and meeting with local dignitaries as a way to find out, where is it and how is it that we can meet the needs of the community. Now, Lutherans can be fussy and finicky with this sort of a thing because, I don't know, I'll just pick a big business in town. Jim Click operates a successful automobile industry, right? So if Jim Click says, I'd like to give you guys $1 million if you call it the Jim Click Memorial Football Field, we would have the right of refusal to any gift. All right? So if there are strings attached where people say, I'll give money if my dad has a seat on the board, or if my kid gets free tuition, we'd have an ability to say no to all those things. Okay? We believe strongly and are recommending as part of the feasibility that in the interests of raising this kind of money, it's a big number, we really need to contract somebody who does this exclusively for a living and not tax our local people to be able to do that themselves. Wayne, you got a little background on this. Why don't you add some color?
I did some work along this line. One of my retirement jobs, I worked as a fundraising consultant for I did 15 Wells Mission congregations to help them build their first church. That was between the years 2003 and 2010, I believe it was. This is a very specialized area of work. quite honestly, we do not have people among our constituents, our membership, who in any way, shape, or form would be able to raise $10 million. I can tell you that right now. I would not be able to raise that, even with having some experience at doing it. And so to find people who are able, willing, and committed Christians to do this kind of work. I mean, there are these fundraising people here in town who do this for their work. That's their job. They raise all of their money for secular organizations, for various foundations and that sort of thing. I feel it's extremely important that we have someone who is a committed Christian, who understands our philosophy, our mission, and our vision, and is willing to work within the parameters that we have set out. And this guy, Jim Clote, and his associates meet that criteria. So our recommendation has been the last several weeks. We have talked to him on Zoom calls, which we in fact had a Zoom call with him this morning. He is ready to go as soon as we are able and give him the green light. Again, if he tells us if we're going to be limited to Wells people, you're not going to be able to raise the money you need. He's been very honest right up front about that. He said we will have to go to the community, and his research is that he has done. He's identified people within the community who would be committed to supporting this kind of an effort. Okay.
On page number 8, you see a number of Lutheran references. There's one that's not on here, but there's one Lutheran reference within our constituency with which he's worked. They did work with Manitowoc Lutheran High School, our own Manitowoc Lutheran High School. I had about an hour-long conversation with the director there and was extremely impressed with Jim Clote, particularly with his consulting work. We can talk more about that offline, but if anybody has questions, would certainly be willing to field them. But as to the financials as a whole, maybe we'll throw it on the table for feedback or comments.
How does our proposed tuition fare with other Wells tuitions? And like with ALA, are we pretty comparable, or?
I think it'd be higher than ALA. Can somebody speak to that? Is ALA 12?
Yeah, ALA is close to that.
But we're not outlandishly higher than other Wells schools?
ALA is 12. Somebody made mention of this at another presentation I did. I don't remember which one it was. But they said, look, Pushridge is 14.
No, they're 11.
Somebody just
They're
took...
14 now.
Are they 14 now?
Okay. So if Pushridge is 14 this next year, somebody made the comment, yeah, but they got foothill property and amenities and fields and gyms and all this stuff. Why would anybody go to this one instead of this one? That's a legitimate question. Anyway, I'm just giving color and conversation that's been happening in the past.
If, as we've said, $2,000 out of pocket is a steal.
But that's assuming that Katie Hobbs doesn't get rid of the ESA program. So what if that happens and that's now mixed and people like myself with 4 kids, 14, 12 grand times 4 can't do that, then I know that's kind of out of the scope of what you're talking about now, but it is important.
I am fully aware, and I know, having lived through the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program, the last 10 years of my active ministry at the high school level was up there, so I'm fully aware of that program. And when that first came into being, the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program, it's a little different than the voucher program down here, but basically it's a voucher program. The first couple of years, everybody said, "Oh, this is never going to never going to survive. The governor put it into place, and they all said the legislature is going to kill it, and we get a new, different governor, it's all going to be dead. Well, it's been in existence now for 30 years. And
We're operating on the team with the notion that government programs never go away. Nevertheless, the concern is legit.
Concern.
And we don't have any more of a crystal ball than any of you do.
But is there, like, in the thought process of how to help people that want school? Like, if I can't go here, I have helpful, and that's not really my calling, so.
We would have to find alternatives and cross that bridge when we got there. We'd have to revert back to ACSTO in those type of organizations.
So you could still accept that as
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
an option.
Oh, sure.
And then Jim Kloot said today, when we talked to him, part of that $10 million, we don't need $10 million to acquire this property. But we could establish an endowment fund, which then would become available for tuition assistance. There are ways to help families. We have a tuition assistance fund here.
Any other questions on the financials?
Yes, sir.
Mine's kind of, I guess, tying students, property, and kind of all this. If you were to develop all the facilities, the cafeteria, the fields, everything,
Right.
What is the capacity that property could hold? 21 acres, how many students?
Well, I guess it would depend to what extent we build it out. Right now, there's a lot of open space. The 7 buildings occupy what, 10% of the space? I don't know. Yeah.
Because like how many students does Push Ridge have? How big is their property? Do we know that?
21 acres is plenty of room to build.
Is it all buildable though, or is there some that's just not usable?
The majority of it, it's not all buildable, but the majority of it is. There's some washes, especially in the back of the property, and my directions are a little goofy. It would be, I guess, the east, on the east side. Do I have that right?
West.
What? It's on this side as I'm going. On one side of the property, there's a wash. Nevertheless, I think somebody made mention that ALA is also 21 acres. So if that helps frame, there's enough space.
Did you, and I get that right, you've got this other firm looking into maybe more of the cost in a couple of weeks for updates and all that.
Yes.
Up to snuff if possible.
We're
the property pretty well.
yeah.
These guys are coming down.
Yeah, the question, can I,
Yeah.
I'll frame the question quick. He asked if we have people who are actively looking into the property and its viability, correct? And what is the results of that? We're turning over every stone. We're about a month in, February 10th, today's the 9th, so we've just begun the due diligence and we're looking at everything from the electricity to the roofs to termites and all that good stuff. The fella on our call today, I think it's coming the 21st, we got a group who's going to do that assessment, and that's a really, really, really comprehensive sort of a thing. So we're going to have data on that before Easter for sure.
Right, yeah, big help, because I want to hear $750,000. I know that goes very fast. Very
Yeah.
fast. Yeah.
Particularly in the inflated era that we got going right now, yes, for sure. That may very well be low.
We also have contacted an architect here in town who specializes in building schools. He built all of the Lehman Academies. And he and I have met a couple times by phone, and then he and I met face to face in his office a couple of weeks ago. And he specifically, we're asking him to put together a master site plan. The fundraising consultant is saying, this is what you have, here's where we would put a gymnasium, here's where we would put a football, here's where, and so on. And he wants to have all of that that site plan so that potential donors might say, I'll pay for the gym. And that's the example that he gave us. He said, I have donors who in the past have said, I will pay for the gym. This is where it's going to be. This is how you envision it to be. I'll pay for it. So, yep.
Yeah. As far as the fundraising part of the thing, why hire somebody to do I guess I'm not clear on that. Why hire somebody to do the fundraising? Is there a reason you couldn't just get like a LACE loan or conventional loan? Because a lot of people are building houses for $3 million and just going to Wells Fargo or somebody and getting a loan. Is there a reason that you do hire somebody for 40 grand and to do the fundraiser or to oversee it, you know, instead of just, you know, or getting commitments from the congregations, you know?
The question is, why would we engage a fundraising consultant when we could go out and borrow $3.5 million and pay it off over 30 years or whatever? Well, among those financial sheets that are leading.
I think it's page 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the short answer is if we have to borrow any money at all, we'll never be able to afford teachers. So it's not, that's the short answer. This is not feasible if we have a mortgage at all.
I know years ago, they had those LACE loans.
Yes.
I don't know if that, to build churches and things.
Right.
But do they still have something like that where they would charge
Minimal interest. LACE is still an active organization. It's headquartered in Michigan.
Right.
I'm familiar with it. There is a lending organization within the Synod called the Church Extension Fund, CEF. And this addresses the question that someone else asked us earlier, is there Synod support for a project like this? The short answer is no. CEF will not extend loans to a group like ours to build a high school. They'll extend loans to congregations to build mission churches, but not to build a high school. There is no money available within the Synod structure right now. That's not had for all the years that I've been involved in the high school, at the Synod level. They will not fund or support high schools.
It seems like this kind of, I mean, this fits into the mission, you know?
Pardon me?
What you're saying, this really fits into the mission thing because, I mean, this is...
We're really trying to work with the area pastors to frame it that way, but we got a lot more work to do.
Things for missions.
Maybe we'll just put you on the team and we'll let you argue with Wells. But the short answer is Wells isn't going to give us any money for high school.
And I argued for that. This was in 1973 or 4.
You go, Wayne.
Yeah, right. And
you lost that one.
I lost that fight. Yeah. When they told us, they said to us that this was at the time when we still had Dr. Martin Luther College and Northwestern College. They said to us, we rely on the area Lutheran high schools for 35% of our freshman class every year. And I said, where's the money? I said, sorry. Yes. So,
any other questions on financials?
I'm just trying to put together the things that I've heard. So we're really not looking for 3.5 billion. We're looking for 10 million, correct? So let me finish my thought. We also have a timeline of sometime by October was when the opportunity to buy this land will no longer exist. So what are we looking at timeline, do you think, to fundraise $10 million? And maybe it's not a whole 10 million, but that's what you're suggesting. And how does that, what's the timeline for fundraising? does it meet our deadline to make the decision on the land? So we have to do the fundraising. If we don't get the funds, there's no point in buying the land, right?
That's right.
So to me, I know the number seems big, $40,000 for a fundraiser does not seem to me to be a significant amount of money if we decided you wanted to move forward. You really need to get the fundraising thing started soon.
I asked him specifically, if our target is 10 mil, how much do you think we could get in the first year? Typically, there would be 3-year commitments, okay?
Okay.
How much do you think we could get in the first year? And he said, my experience is 5 mil, half of it.
No, that needs to be tempered by, what if we only raise 5 mil? Then we're only going to get 2.5 to start, which is why the interest-only first year may be crucial, because we might have to wait for year 2 and year 3 for some of the other funds to come in. So let me answer your question directly. He answered a part of it. We would like to contract with Clote and get their consultant firm. There's 2 phases. The first is the consultation. And in 5 weeks, they sit down and basically develop a list of, we'll say, 500 donors, people we want to meet with who might be interested in contributing to the project, 3-year commitment, whatever. He's made no bones about this. He says, you're going to need multiple 7-figure donations in order to meet your goals, $1 million donations. And that's where reaching out to the community is going to have to be part of our concept, all right? Otherwise, we have no chance.
Here tonight that is willing to write out a check for $1 million.
I got my checkbook.
So we hope to have him on board. We hope to have him on board by the end of the month. We're actively pursuing a number of different donation angles in order to get this $40,000 so that it's not yet on the churches, so that we can hire Clote at least for this 5-week consultation phase, because after he goes at the and develops the list of 500 donors, he should have a working idea of, we think you can raise this number or this number or this number. And that's going to be very impactful as to whether we can go forward from there. Is that addressing your question?
Are you having difficulty getting the $40,000 that you can get this guy started?
Yes.
Yeah.
Janet?
Are all the churches going to be equally vested in this? Or is this going to lie mostly on Redeemer's shoulders, or is it going to be divided up? I mean, there's, what, 3 main churches?
The question is, are all the churches going to be equally vested? We've presented this to all of the Tucson area churches and are asking for their support and partnership. Some churches are larger than others. Some churches have parishioner base who have, I mean, God gives you whatever kind of money. We'll ask people. But yes, we're casting the net as wide as possible. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, Janet, but you can ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
Rob?
With regards to her question, who then will hold the title?
Go ahead. Separate. That gets us into our next slide.
Yeah, it takes us right into the organizational structure of this thing. And unless there are other questions about finances.
Dan?
Well, if I understand this right, though, so your home church would sponsor you for $5K per kid?
Yeah.
So that's kind of wherever you're getting your kids from, that's where most of the money's coming from?
That would be
for the operating budget.
That would be in lieu of federation costs. Yeah. Like right now, we give 3% of our offerings to ALA. But we would dissolve our federation with ALA. We would start a federation down here for whatever the new high school is. And in lieu of a % of the budget, we would just support. Each church would say, you just send your own kid. Well, let's just say, and maybe this addresses your question too, Holy Cross is much smaller. Well, what if they don't have any kids? I mean, if they want to send money to the high school, that's their prerogative, but you're at least going to support your own kids from your own church who might go to the high school, right? And that's the concept. Again, whether this ends up this way or something different is for somebody who's going to be the president or principal or director. This is just a feasibility concept at this point. Here's one possible way forward. That's all.
Yeah. To me, though, it seems like, say like Holy Cross wouldn't have anybody
Right
here. So it seems like we'd want to have some more skin in the game from
the area churches. Back to Janet's question.
I did this presentation at Holy Cross about a month ago, and I was amazed at the enthusiasm that this generated down there. Absolutely amazed. I did not expect that kind of enthusiasm.
Maynard?
Has this Federation of Tucson congregations all agreed to the proposal for $5,000 support for each of the students from their congregation?
No, because again, this is just a concept, and we haven't really hung any meat on the bone. We're not asking for approval for anything that's on here. We're mostly saying, can we go forward with this fella, Jim Clote, so that we can get the list of 500 and spit out the, how much money might we raise? Is it 5 million, 6 million? Because if we can't raise that amount of money, we're not going to be able to buy the property, and if we can't buy the property, we're not going to be able to fund, we're not going to have money to buy teachers. So that's where we are. We're going to go through this in next steps, but the pastors basically said, take the concept to your local congregations and send it up the flagpole. So that's what we're doing tonight.
Can we move forward if we don't have 100% of our area churches? Let's say we only had 3 or 4 that said, yep, I want to join the Federation. Would we be able to move forward with that?
Well, synod means walk together. It would be better if we had everybody on board. And so that's why we really would appreciate everybody's feedback. Best ideas win. And if ever, it doesn't have to look like this. This is just one way or one idea of how we believe we can move forward. The one thing that's abundantly clear is if we don't own the land, it is not feasible. And that's largely where the fundraising comes in on the front side.
I don't know if this is considered part of feasibility, but in the realm of reality where not everybody pays their tuition bill and it's necessary and needed, is there the idea to have a business manager? Whose shoulders does that fall on to make sure that the bills are being paid and that kind of thing so it can stay functioning?
Hold families accountable.
You're asking a fantastic question. Kind of scratching at a scab a little bit, but
Sorry.
that's all right.
Well, I mean,
Your question.
though, but it happens.
No, absolutely it does. The model that we've presented as far as feasibility means it's entirely tuition funded, 100%. Now, maybe we're going to get golf tournaments, and we'll get donations with the gala and those sorts of things. But the model that we presented is it's entirely tuition funded. And your question was, what happens if people don't pay their bill? We really haven't thought that far because, again, the president of whoever that person is would need to develop those sorts of mechanisms and nitty-gritty type of stuff. Nevertheless, that's a legitimate, that's going to have to be solved.
But the fact that the out-of-pocket expense is only $2,000.
I just didn't know how reliant we are on that if we were in the position where somebody didn't pay even just the $2,000. But
Paul?
Is the land large enough to where one of the buildings could be leased for a couple of years for a preschool or something, so like a mixed use?
Yes.
For a certain period of time?
Yes, we're actively looking into that.
I know at one point a few years ago, there was a huge demand. Everybody was looking to try to find a place for a charter school.
Paul's question is the campus large enough for mixed use? Namely, are there buildings for preschool where maybe we rent out the preschool to somebody else, make a couple bucks on the side hustle, and then, that helps grease the skids and pay bills more widely. Not only is the answer to your question yes, the campus is big enough, there's facilities there for a preschool, but we're actively meeting with Catalyst partners, Wayne mentioned them before, about what possibilities might we use for mixed use to make this go forward. We've just begun those conversations last, Nicole, 2-3 weeks? So they're pretty new.
Again, this is a feasibility study. There's a few things that would have to happen before we can open the door. Yes, Jim.
Is there, and I don't know this other than knowing that there's portable classrooms out there, is that something you could lease to put on the property, portable classrooms, just to get it established?
Yeah.
So you get your other renovation done?
I don't think we would need to bring in portables to begin.
None?
I don't think so. And then, of course, even if we did, you'd have to go through the conditional use process, and there are some hurdles that I have jumped through before, and I'm not sure I want to do it again. Yeah.
Friends of the county.
All right, just bring her home unless anybody else has got financial questions. Organization. Okay. Somebody asked, Rob, was it you, who would own the title? We just got a report on our call today that there's a state, what's the word? Nonprofit. You got to file with the state and the federal government for nonprofit. We filed for a 501c3, an independent nonprofit. I don't even know what the name of it is. I suppose it's irrelevant. But there would be an independent entity in which the name of this organization would be. All right? The K-12 is a concept. Nicole asked this in her survey. What if Redeemer just tacked on or added on? Push Ridge does K-12. La Paloma does K-12. This is kind of widely available. I don't know if it would be K-12. Maybe Redeemer K-8. Maybe the high school would be independent. That's all to be determined. Nevertheless, we're just presenting a concept here. Daycare and preschool would remain with the local parish. This assumes, of course, that if it's a K-12 organization under a separate 501c3, that the preschools, this is largely because Sarita has an expansive daycare program with 200 plus, childcare with 200 plus kids. If it's an independent K-12, the concept here would be like Redeemer School would not be Redeemer School. It would still meet here on this campus, but it would be part of a K-12 Tucson Lutheran Academy, Tucson Lutheran High School, Tucson Lutheran Middle School, Tucson Lutheran Elementary, Marana, so forth and so on. But it would be part of this independent agency where you could match curriculums and marketing and have all kinds of different synergies, again, conceptually, which mean it would have an independent board. You talked about that before. So Grace and Shepherd and Redeemer would all send representatives, and the church would not call the teachers. The board, the school board, would call the teachers to serve from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, which means go join any congregation you want. And this kind of gets to your question where usually if you serve at Redeemer Lutheran School, you should belong to Redeemer Lutheran Church because the school is a ministry of the church. Well, if it's a K-12, you can join whatever congregation you want. And so many of our teachers have differing gifts, musical and otherwise. You could really help a lot of area congregations. And then there'll be a governing board from circuit congregations. Again, this is one concept. Whether it ends up this way or not, I don't know that we need to get too hiccuped on it, because when the president comes, whoever that person is, they will be very, very influential on bringing and pulling all this together.
There would be an umbrella organization, this 501c3, the umbrella organization that conceivably could be called Tucson Lutheran Academy, and then sub-organizations underneath that umbrella, Tucson Lutheran High School, or call it whatever you want, and Redeemer Lutheran Elementary, and that, or all of those sub-organizations would fall under that umbrella organization.
Incidentally, this gets to your question earlier, where we're at a K-12, It's possible that for space reasons, we could take the 5th or 6th through 8th and then put the middle school on that campus, and you might have middle and high school on the same campus. I mean, conceptually.
If it was, you know, is there enough space ready to start with those first 2 high school grades and maybe move some of our upper graders over so that it frees up space here?
Yep.
Because, you know, otherwise we're going to be, I don't know, I've thought in my mind, maybe we'll have to take out the art room or the music room or the library, or what are we going to do?
The dreaming is fun, but because of the limitations of our team, this is one concept, and how it exactly ends up remains to be seen. It's just beyond the scope of our team.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else on organization? Otherwise, we're going to go to takeaway. No, we're not. Sorry, lied. Sustainability. So, on this slide, we have to ask the question. Remember when I talked about Manitowoc Lutheran High School before? Manitowoc Lutheran High School, I talked to that guy for an hour. I worked with him 20 years ago, 25 years ago maybe. Really, really, really good guy. And he said Manitowoc Lutheran High School has 11,000 Lutherans feeding the high school. They have 23 feeder grade schools feeding the high school. And they have 225 kids. We have 1,600 Lutherans in all of Tucson. We have 1 school feeding the high school. That's a really big lift. Yes? That's why we say, look before you leap. How do we know that if we go barreling down this road, we got to look at how we're going to keep it open, right? We got to keep it going. We can't just, get in there and say, oh, 3 years later it's no more. And so that's what this slide is aimed at. We really, really need, as congregations in the whole circuit, not just Redeemer, but everybody, all the churches, need to consider. Who asked about the? You were asking about the ESAs. If the ESAs go away, if the ESAs go away, we have lots of problems more broadly, just even for our K-8. But now that ESAs are here, it's possible that we could look at opening additional feeder schools. We're actively conversing with Sarita. There may be a way forward. They've got the daycare down there. Pastor Hyman's aware and has verbalized we would be a natural next step. So it's on people's radars. I mean, nothing's planned yet, but we'd also like to look at additional Lutherans are needed. 1,600 is... But we're reminded that God once took down the Midianites with 300 Israelites, right? Pastoral student recruitment. Remember when we talked about 20 per kid? 20 amongst all of our churches. We have about 20 per grade. It's really, really important that pastors get involved and talk to families and say, would you please consider this? This is a really valuable thing to keep your child connected to Jesus for life. We don't want to just have them graduate whatever, 8th grade, hand them over to the devil. We want them connected to Jesus for the rest of their life. And pastors can be valuable, extremely valuable in that conversation. And then the next one is comprehensive family ministry, which means, we mentioned this before, I mean, if you haven't got the parents, you don't have the kids. You can subcontract the kid out to the school, but that is not a surrogate for a faith-filled, devotional, spiritual, worshipful life inside the home. And so we really, as pastors, want to make sure those things mesh together. Again, so that we can keep people connected to Jesus Christ for let your light shine for all of your days. Wayne.
When we talk to the pastors, this places a heavy burden of responsibility on them, particularly as we look to the possibility of establishing not just an additional feeder school or 2, but also establishing mission congregations to broaden that footprint. And, yes, Redeemer is looking at one of those options, pursuing the the mission possibility up in north of Marana over here. But, you know, Vail and Benson and Grace Downtown, and there are so many opportunities to expand our churches, the footprint of wells in the community. And this places a pretty big burden of responsibility on each of the pastors. And when we met with the pastors, I will have to say that we could perceive a certain amount of, you know, but this is the kind of a commitment that we're asking for from our people, our congregations, our pastors. So, yeah. Comments about that?
I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
To talk about additional feeder schools, you really only mentioned in Sarita. So are we asking Grace or Shepherd, you know, to consider trying to open a school? Is that literally what we're thinking here?
Mostly we're planting the seed. Again, we're just presenting feasibility and saying our small numbers certainly don't argue in favor of it. It's very, very challenging. And we have to be real about those things. So we've given the same presentation to the pastors and to all of the congregations and now tonight to Redeemer. These are things that we should really heartfelt think about before we bite off a project like this.
Every church's kind of radar is,
yeah.
You know, okay.
Yeah.
I see. All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
In general question, as far as the school enrollment this year for all the sister congregations, 7th and 8th graders, what's the total enrollment now into the Lutheran, 7th and 8th grade right now?
We got about 10 in 8th grade, 11 in 7th, or vice versa?
8 in 8th grade and 11 in 7th grade.
And I believe they're all Lutheran kids. Is that correct?
That's total from like Shepherd,
Yeah.
Red Cross.
Well, this is a legit question because when you talk about 20 kids, how many are even sending them here? Is that largely what you're asking?
What the total enrollment from what's the possible 9th grade enrollment? Is it going to be like the 11 and the coming up? Or?
Yeah, that goes back to the student slide. And this is why we're saying we really need to look hard at additional feeder schools because 8 kids in a grade not going to make you much of high school.
There's a lot of people who want to come here that aren't Lutheran that I know personally that want to attend this school specifically. I don't think it'd be hard if I can convince them.
Takeaways.
If you look at
sorry, we got one more.
Well, I just want to add that I know 8 seems like a small number for an 8th grade class, but you also have to realize too that, like when you mentioned Push Ridge and people wanting to get it, people will start sending their children starting in 5th and 6th grade into those schools to ensure that they have a spot.
Right.
So if there was the possibility, if we had high school, I think we would see less and less of that.
See a higher
And
census in the middle school grades?
We would see higher numbers in those grades because they wouldn't have to leave to try to get into a Christian school locally. And so have to keep that in mind because that does add up. Losing a couple kids each class, it really adds up. It snowballs when you get, you have 20 and then you end up with half of that.
Especially when my best friend left, right? And so parents make decisions based on that. Wayne, give us the takeaways.
All right, if you look at page 9 of your packet, we put together a list of the next steps that we will need to address specifically as if we decide to move forward. And I'm not going to read these to you, but we've articulated what I think are some things that we need to be doing if we're going to proceed with this. And especially if we expect to meet that target of 2024, we've got a lot of work to do, between now and then if we're going to open by then. Even if we consider trying to open by 2025, there's a lot that needs to be done. And we are looking to expand this team. This has been a feasibility team. Is it possible? I think the conclusion that we can reach is yes, it's possible. If, okay? And so we're looking tonight to gather some consensus among the folks here at Redeemer, as we did with some of the other congregations. As I told you, when I presented this to Holy Cross, I was amazed at the reception that we got. Enthusiasm and excitement for this. I was positively blown away by that. We saw some of that at when we presented down at Grace downtown. It was a smaller group, but there was a lot of enthusiasm there. Pastor Mueller presented up at Good Shepherd, 2 weeks ago?
Shepherd of the Hills.
Yeah, I mean Shepherd of the Hills, yeah. And we're perceiving that we can, generally speaking, we can say there is strong support for this movement. And there would be enough indication here for us to proceed, to move ahead, to move forward. But it's going to take people. Quite honestly, the 5 people that have been involved, we said, Nicole has been involved, Pastor Miller's been involved, I've been involved, and 2 guys from Shepherd of the Hills. They were primarily the property guys because they're the real estate gurus. But to go beyond this now, it's going to take some more heads, people who are supportive, encouraging, passionate, and are willing to step forward and do some of the work. And so I have sign-up sheets here for anyone who would be interested in willing to serve on the implementation team. I put together about 6 different subcommittees for that implementation team, everything from curriculum to property development to finances and all of those kinds of things. But we're looking for people who are willing to step forward and offer their services to help. You can read through those next steps for yourself. We are looking for congregational support. If it takes a motion by or a recommendation from a church council to the voters of a congregation, well, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. We need to have some authorization to move forward.
Rob.
Yeah. Do you have a special channel or a special envelope for donations?
No. You make it out to Redeemer and we'll put it in the right bucket.
Right now, yes, that's the way the approach. Quite honestly, our conversations with Mr. Kloot have been, don't do any active fundraising. Let us do that. And I think that's good advice. We are actively looking for that seed money here to engage Kloot. We need $45,000 to engage Kloot to do his first phase. The rest would come as a result of his fundraising efforts. We would, take it out of that to pay for his services. But initially, we need to come up with $45,000. Right now, we have 11. Pastor Miller and I have talked to a couple of individuals about filling that gap. Nothing has come through yet. We have
they've indicated support, but as of today,
verbal commitments,
right.
But that doesn't put So,
What our team's working on now, Rob, just is we'd like to engage Claude. He not only does he do fundraising, but he's consultation services. So many of you asked a lot of questions about details. All we're doing is feasibility. This next phase will help hang meat on the skeleton. And I think we're going to have, at the end of those 5 weeks, a lot more to share, not the least of which is a number of what he believes we may reasonably raise in the process. Once we get that data, I think we're going to have a lot better idea of what this may or may not look like. But until we hire that consultant, fundraising consultant, this is where we are today.
okay. Any other closing comments here? We're coming up on our designated time that we allotted. We don't want to hold you beyond that, but if there are other questions, feel free. We've got a couple minutes yet. Mayor?
Have you approached any of the congregations in Tucson area for this financial seed money?
We've basically presented to them what we presented to you tonight.
Have you not solicited from the congregations for seed?
No, we've gotten some, but not.
We've not specifically solicited on account of the fact that we want people to give to the main, this whatever, the $5-10 million thing, and we have been having some promised donations since January that have not yet materialized. And so we thought that we had it covered, and perhaps we do. It hadn't come in yet. So I think the short answer to your question is no. However, we're on the clock, and so we may need to do that in not too distant future.
If we can measure enthusiasm and convert that enthusiasm to
dollar bills,
$1,000 bills.
What do you got in this thing here? Nicole Glenn, you had your hand up.
Yes, from someone watching currently on our live stream, we have a $10,000 pledge.
All right.
Okay.
So our number's up to $21,000.
All right, we're halfway home.
And we're going to lock the door until we.
We're just going to keep passing in the circle.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments that you wish to share with us or individually? You know where we are.
I genuinely, we put a lot of work into this. We don't have all the answers yet. You've asked good questions. We would love to be able to provide as much detail as possible. If you're willing to support, if you're willing to help, if you have ideas, just talk with us. This is all above board and transparent. We would be very, very happy to get as much information as possible so that we can provide a good Lutheran Christian future for our kids. All right. Let's ask a blessing and then we'll go home. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with you all. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very, very much for your interest.